Welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, July 13th. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. I'm Roger Arnold. I am joined by Marcia Calloway, Mary Layton, Vice Chair, and Rob Gear. Yes, this is a remote-only meeting in accordance with the temporary provisions to the open meeting law, which means there is no physical location where this meeting can be experienced contemporaneously. We invite public comment for all items on the agenda. Please state your name and locatable address. Please stay to 3 minutes, and please address them to me as chair. As a reminder, the public comment period is to listen and to receive comments and to take them under advisement for the potential future agenda items. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Yeah, that's great. Is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? Okay, not seeing any. Please, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, the next item on the agenda, I believe, is public comment. Is that right? Let me just pull up my... Okay, or public participation, as we phrased it. So go ahead. I believe the first person whose Zoom hand I saw was Stuart Richards. Go ahead, Stuart.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I'd like to repeat my request that meetings in the future be held not only remotely, but also in person. I think there is a lot to be gained by actually sitting in the same room with people and with people talking to each other. And I wish that you would seriously consider that. The second and perhaps and the more important issue concerning the problems that we're having in town with the police, the DPW, and perhaps other offices and departments is the public's right to know. It seems to me, and Roger, I do thank you for sending a very limited response to some of the questions that have been asked, but there are many other questions that are out there that have been asked by other people, not only by Stuart Richards and John Farrell and Doug Wilberding and Bill Scavone. There really are a lot of other questions out there, and they need to be answered. And, you know, this is not a Q&A session. I understand that. But unless you take those questions seriously and you answer them to the best of your ability and spend the time and the effort to do that, the public is not going to be informed, and the public has a right to be informed. It's the basis of our democracy that we have to work with, that the public should be a participant. So, you know, the approach that's been taken thus far has been one of simply asking questions and asking for answers. But I mean, you're well aware of the more formal procedures that can be followed. And I'm really hoping that we don't have to follow formal procedures and that we can proceed informally. So please take that under advisement. Please answer the questions, all of them, fully, to the best of your ability. And I thank you for doing that in advance. There's no reason not to, as far as I can tell.
Great. Thank you so much, Stuart. I think the next hand I saw, I believe, was Amy Stringer.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all well today. I'm going to read this just so I make sure I stay in my 3 minutes.
Thanks.
As someone who values harmony and positive relationships, I'm disappointed by what feels to me to be an adversarial relationship sort of developing between me and you and the members of our town government. And it makes me sad. I don't like it. But one of the things I always have done to achieve harmony is to talk and to have open, honest conversations about things that we may feel differently about and think differently about. But that feels so impossible with this board because my emails go unanswered. Rod has never gotten back to me with an email I sent him quite a long time ago. Questions feel like they're ignored, and there doesn't seem to be any venue for us to just talk. And it's so frustrating because I don't understand why we just can't have an open public conversation. And I feel like secrecy just breeds distrust. If we think there's some hidden agenda, then our imaginations just go. When I look at the state of our police department, now down to one officer, I find myself wondering whether Rod and Roger want to see the department dismantled. I don't know if you do, but I kind of get the impression that you don't want us to have a police department. Or maybe you have a vision for policing in town that you would like to see implemented that's different from what we've had. I don't know. But the voters of the town voted to have a new building for our police department, and we voted to approve the budget for 4 police officers, and we voted down the $50,000 proposed police study. We had a police department that was really fantastic, especially with Jennifer, who I knew better, and I thought she was amazing to talk about community policing. But it seems, if I understand what a select board is supposed to do, and I'm not sure I do, but it seems like you should be implementing what the voters of the town seem to have said we want. And I would be very happy to hear what you're thinking about the police department, what Rod's thinking about it, if you have a different vision and why. But in the meantime, I would really love to have our department back in full swing because we voted for it, we want it, and we paid for it. And that's all from me, but next time you see a hand, it'll be on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I think Demo, I think you were next.
Thank you. I too, like Amy, will read for 2 reasons. So I stay within my 3 minutes. And so I also don't babble because sometimes I can do that. So bear with me. You have in your packet a letter that I spoke about at the last regular meeting.
Demo.
In the letter, I asked that residents write to the town manager and select board, urging them to hire 2 police officers and a police chief as soon as possible. I would also like to request a correction to the draft minutes to reflect what I actually said at the last regular meeting of June 22nd. And I have included my comments, which are in this packet also. It is my understanding that we have lost yet another officer, Alex, with his last day being today. Now we only have the officer in charge, Anna Ingram, in charge of who? It should be 4 officers, but she's doing it alone, and I commend her for that. I don't have an answer as to why the revolving door, but maybe you do. Is it a lack of resources provided to the Norwich PD? Only you know that answer. On another note, I also ask that you not only thank those residents who speak at a select board meeting for their comments, but that you actually take the time to listen to what they have to say. Some of their recommendations make a lot of sense. I wish to thank Roger and the board for some information that was provided to the questions that have been asked by many, and would also urge the select board to always keep the lines of communications open at all times. Only then will you have total transparency. In closing, I wish to thank Claudette Brochure for her years of service to the town and to wish her well. Thank you for affording me the time. Roger, how much time did I take?
I wasn't sure. Sometimes I'm actively listening and not strolling over to the clock. So it's
I hope you
it's a double task. It's a double task. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Charlotte, I believe you were next. You're on mute. I'm sorry. The mute, the agony of the button.
Am I still?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I thought I had clicked myself off before. Sorry. Well, the first thing I want to do is thank Claudette for her service to our community. I remember when she was running against the two Johns, and she and Chris were accused of being the uneducated Jew, and we came out in support of her, and she's done yeoman's service for us for a long time. So thank you, Claudette. I also want to acknowledge a letter that I received from you, Roger, in which you corrected me when I had said that I said June 13th, it was June 22nd board meeting, that Rod had indicated that Chief Keeling was considering a part-time work with Norwich. That was incorrect. It was Officer Barry who was quoted as having done that. So I apologize. And I'm sorry if, in fact, I have been unfair to everyone and that my messages have been quoted out of context.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
I would like to go on, and in addition to your letter, I received a number of letters in support of the post that I made that is in today's packet. This letter is from a Norwich resident whom I can verify is gainfully employed, but who does not wish for his name to be revealed because of his position. He wrote, "Thank you for your listserv post today. It brought me up to speed on the inadequate police coverage in Norwich. I've lived in Norwich for some time. Over that span, I have called 911 for police assistance 3 times, and altogether it took over 25 minutes for them to show up, off business hours in the night. They appeared and resolved the issues. One, a drunk, who was angry and walking up my driveway with a rifle and banging on my door at 5 a.m. Another was a double stabbing a few years ago with a lot of blood spill and screaming. Thanks to the available police, the issues were resolved. I grew up a very safe traditional sportsman who can handle firearms well. I sold all firearms in our family 8 years ago. It was the escalating violence in America that prompted me to sell everything. I no longer hunt. I have grown older and don't want to cause hurt to anything. In light of the town manager and select board's inability to adequately cover the town with 9/11 policing, juxtaposed with the hot national crime environment, I am considering for the first time in my life purchasing an automatic rifle designed to stop humans in their tracks should they show up at my residence threatening my family. Please be aware I am not a violent person. I do, however, have little tolerance for the direction our country is moving and the rampant anger and common display that violence is okay. I don't have anger issues. Please consider that a slow or no response by the police is matched by emergency medical care. If a person is dying and bleeding out, a professional ambulance crew could readily be available and waiting to render aid just out of sight, but will not do so until the police signal them forward with the declaration that the scene is safe. There can be no medical or fire service until the scene is safe. The fact that the town is not providing adequate police service is also directly denying medical service in higher risk situations. This includes events such as an enraged person and something as simple as an express threat to somebody. A weapon could be as simple as a frying pan hanging on a wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think Jan is next, if that was right.
Yep, Jan Lasbrev, 95 Upper Pasture Road. So first, I would like to support Marcia's amendment when in the minutes, she amended them for last regular meeting to ask for an interim report on the HR consultant. to the board, and I would urge that that includes some kind of abbreviated version that is acceptable to the public. So I wanted to support that. Right now, with saying nothing or vague statements or things that are only done in executive session, it's not enough information for either the employees or the taxpayers, and it really leaves things open. The only statements we've gotten recently have been the chair stating that to his knowledge, the consultant's work had not been paused, but we didn't follow up with Rod on that. And also that the HR consultant cost $200 an hour was part of the information given. So one question is, what is the scope of work of this consultant and where can that be seen? We want to get our money's worth out of that, and we don't want to waste it with pausing and unknown agendas and so forth. Our employees still feel that these issues are unresolved and don't know what's happening with the consultant. In the town manager's report for this week, he says that he will present information on a recruitment and retention strategy. I don't see that on the agenda, so I'm assuming it's rolled into an executive session that's on the agenda. There's no mention on the agenda of work environment HR topics that are my concern, and I want those to be kept to the fore. I don't believe the issue that we need to talk about is retention and recruitment. That is a result of having a work environment that causes enough dissatisfaction so that people leave or are ready to leave. So we should be talking about that, our systemic issues, and addressing those. Otherwise, hiring doesn't do us any good because people will get here and then leave when they understand what the situation is. And also in the case of the select board and the police, people won't even apply to be on the police force because they know that it's not supported strongly. One last thing, sorry if I'm going over, the town manager's report starts with the statement that the Norwich Police Department is continuing to work well with the cooperation of state police in Hartford. I want to not leave that standing. It is not fair to say it's working well in the eyes of the townspeople. The kudos to the one officer we have doing stellar work, but we are burdening our neighbors with not pulling on them and not being able to reciprocate. I know, sorry, Roger. And it's not going well, and I want to point that out. And thank you.
Thank you. Michael Costa, I think you're next.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Michael Costa, 40 Sunback Lane. I'm here for three reasons. Number one, everywhere I go in Norwich, whether it's coaching baseball or seeing the friends of my children or just walking down and chatting with my neighbors, every conversation features the phrase, "What the heck's going on with the town?" So instead of continuing that conversation without any information, I thought I'd come to a select board meeting. Number two, there are people who continue to write with their concern about the town whose opinion I really value. For a few years, I was Dina's neighbor. I happen to know Amy a little bit. I've seen Stuart at other public meetings. And so I thought to myself, geez, if they're concerned, perhaps I should be concerned too. And three, I spent 20 years working for government agencies in 4 different states in both staff positions and appointed positions. And the one thing I learned was you are always going to be transparent. You either do it up front and have a conversation, or you do it later when people are really angry. I don't have enough facts to understand what's going on here or to render any judgment on that, but I believe that in my bones. And so Norwich is a small enough and caring enough place where we ought to be able to have a conversation about what's going on and pivot to problem solving. And so I hope to learn more and I hope to stay involved. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. Okay, I do see one more hand. I haven't developed rules for second and third comments, so so go ahead, Stuart. Please go ahead. Please make a quick second comment.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. The suggestions that have been made, I think, are good ones. There is no reason that I can see why we can't have an agenda item where there actually is a Q&A. I mean, this is a small town. We should be able to ask questions and get answers verbally and also in writing. So I hope that's fast enough, Roger.
Yes, thank you.
And I hope the point is well taken. It just doesn't seem logical to me that we can't have a Q&A session and an agenda item, because this is important stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just reiterate on behalf of the group, as I have previously, which I can appreciate is very unsatisfying. But what I will repeat is that the town is committed to fostering a respectful and safe workplace for all employees, and that we have engaged various expertise to do that work. And when that work is finished, we hope to share to the extent possible what we learn. But that is, I'm saying that, but at this point, I think the three other board members might say a version of the same. We all have different approaches to that answer, different mannerisms, different affect. But nonetheless, that is the position of the board. We would have to be patient. Okay. So I think a future agenda item could be other forms of engagement. It's something the board I think every board struggles with in our community. But I will say a Q&A answer a Q&A session will be leaving questions answered in this manner right now. Okay, we're going to move on with our agenda. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I think we need to, this is one of those times where I think it ceases to be a consent agenda. So let's break it up. Why don't we get, if I can have some help, why don't we get a motion to approve the AP warrant first?
Oh, so moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion on the AP warrant? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that has been approved. Okay. Next is to approve minutes from June 22nd and July 6th. One, Marcia, if I may, I think we can never sort of have no and then have a sort of asterisk in the motions. It has not been our practice. The minutes, the motions are recorded as yes, no, abstain. So because I'm zooming and chairing, but one of your corrections was that you wanted to explain your no vote, essentially. And I just don't think that we should be doing that as a practice. I think the minutes, the discussion may capture the spirit of the discussion, but I think the yes and no is pretty black and white. So okay. I want to, okay. And it's been our practice. That's just, I think okay. The LCT and other agencies will advise. Okay, so you accept. So we have to note that we're going to not have that correction.
Yeah, the words due to overbroad proposal.
Yeah, we can't explain our votes. I would say yes, because of overbroad proposal. We discussed how Yes.
Yeah. I'll just make sure in the future that that's encapsulated in the discussion part.
I think that's excellent. Yeah, I think board members probably agree, but I don't want to, just because this has been our longstanding practice. I'm seeing nods at least, so I can move. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. And the next thing, I think reading, and then the other thing that the other item that you sort of introduced that you corrected was introducing long written statements into the record. There isn't just a function for that. So I would also vote to. And we discussed the context for why that should not be as well. Okay.
It's in the packet, so it's fine.
Great. So we're not going to have that as part of the minutes either. Okay, great. So then we had a couple of corrections from residents as well. Okay. So I think when we have corrections, we need to have the benefit of very specific clarity in where they're inserted. So when people work with Miranda, the board can know where they're going to go. Go ahead, Mary. Do you have a comment?
Also, I don't think it's been our practice to have citizens correct the record.
It hasn't been, but that's what I wanted to hear from people.
Right.
Well,
go ahead, Marcia.
Well, I think if people want to correct the statement, that their own statement, I think that's fair enough. If they were misconstrued, or, I think that's appropriate.
I think editing a comment that was made is different than adding a comment that was not picked up. So in some ways, the person who's recording our minutes is doing us a service, and they've demonstrated a consistency of judgment and a consistent style over many, many years. And I think it would be a disservice to that good work to begin to add pressure on changing that. I think if there's something factually wrong or something that needs to be specifically corrected, I think the addition of things is something that we have a recording. There's other mechanisms for the nuance of these comments. And so I would basically reject all comments that have been, go ahead.
I'm just wondering about Charlotte Metcalf's correction with regard to Officer Ingram, because that does seem to have been omitted, and that was a factual problem. Officer Ingram corrected him, referring to Rod, to say that all 7 calls would have been attended to by Norwich officers if there had been any on duty. That seems a factual error.
I actually don't think it was. It wasn't a correction. I think they said the same thing, but they chose to interpret it differently. And that was what we then went on to discuss. If you remember, I then asked, can you repeat that? And then we had a discussion about what that meant. Which is why I don't think it should be part of the minutes. There was no correction.
Well, it's in the packet anyway.
It was a conversation. It was a conversation, right? For sure. We discussed what it meant, but we didn't just correct anything. I don't know. Right now, Marcia and I are having a conversation, which we can continue to do. Marcia and I are really happy to do that together, but I want to see what board members think. Go ahead, Mary.
I think that the process is more coherent if select board members suggest the corrections, and perhaps there's some mechanism for the public to call your select board member and say, hey, my name was not spelled correctly, or I said this, to have it come through that way, and also to have it come through in a timely way so it's in the packet so everybody can see it. But, I think if only a few people from the public who've not been elected are, very involved, their voice becomes kind of magnified, I think, by having their thoughts being expressed in the minutes. I think the correspondence and the public comment are a more appropriate time for them, for, citizens to, let their thoughts and feelings be known.
So why don't we?
I think this is the venue for it, the minutes.
Well, thank you. So thank you, Mary. So what I'm hearing, and this is maybe a good way to sort of get consensus on this, is so what I'm hearing is that when citizens or board members offer corrections, we should take it upon ourselves to make sure that we are adding that into our final minutes rather than seeing it there and voting to accept it. We should, take the time to actually discuss and vote to correct it. So so with that in mind, unless we do that now, we're going to say that the minutes without the edits will be our final minutes.
Yeah, they would be the draft minutes if we went in that direction. But Rob has not spoken yet. I'd like to hear what he has to say. Also, Marcia, she wants to.
Go ahead, Rob.
When there are issues of substance, incorrect interpretation or incorrect quotes, I think that needs to be corrected. But if it's a general enhancement of what was said to try and amplify its meaning according to whoever is concerned about it, that's probably less valuable, especially if it's included in the packet as a note that there is a discrepancy.
Okay, so I think we actually have consensus on this. I just, Marcia, did you have any other point that you want to make? And this is good that we're talking about this. It's correspondence is a good thing to talk about.
Just for clarification of process.
Sure.
So anyone should continue to do what they have been doing, which is send in correspondence. And if they want to contact a board member to say, I think this piece of information in the draft minutes was incorrect, we can then put that forward as a correction.
Yes, I wouldn't suggest. I wouldn't suggest that lobby your favorite or your nearest board member. But I would say rather that it would have to be voted on by the board to enter into the record, is what I would say. So if you come to a meeting having had a prior conversation with the resident, ready to make that case to your colleagues, all the better. But we're really just going to, rather than just sort of, I think what I'm hearing from this discussion, rather than just accept it by default, we have to pull it out and vote to add it to correspondence. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
So I think it's good for us to see in writing what is suggested as a correction, whether or not it's select board member or member of public, although I'm a little dubious on the member of the public part of it. So I'm not quite sure what we are. Are we just talking about maybe that we still allow the public to say in writing what they think is incorrect, and then we'll just pull that message. Would that be considered, though, correspondence?
Well, yes.
It is, right?
So it would be correspondence, but we would be talking about the correspondence for the approval of the minutes. So you could talk about it in correspondence, and then your motion for the approval of the minutes could inform it. But ultimately, hopefully this doesn't happen too much, so we can get a consent agenda. Does that make sense?
I think so, but we'll have to be very careful to pull it out and, just connect the dots.
I think that's right. And that's supposed to be my gig. So I'm taking some notes. So I'll help us with that.
What does Marcia think? She's looking pensive.
Go ahead, Marcia, and then let's wrap up.
Well, I'm thinking about what Miranda asked us to do, which was to send in corrections early.
Yep.
So, I guess we still do that.
Yep.
And then if something comes in later, we just bring it up at the board meeting.
Right. So what what I'll say now is I see hands. I need to get a motion on the table, my fellow public. Okay. So what we can do is we could move. So if someone could make a motion to approve the minutes, that would be fine. That would imply that, as they were drafted, not as correspondence indicates they should be revised. So can I get a motion?
Yeah, I move to approve the draft minutes.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? I think we're good on that. I see members of the public. I see your hands. I promise. All right. So one of the things that a colleague in another town told me to tell people, which I said I would never do for my community, is to say that meetings happen in front of the public, not for the public. But, that's actually statute. But nonetheless, go ahead, Dima. Would you like to make your public comment?
She muted?
Yes, you're muted, I believe.
Yeah.
Back and forth there. Okay. Yes. First of all, as somebody who has filmed select board meetings for 14 years in several communities and then exclusively Norwich throughout the 14 years, I can relate to what you're saying, Roger, about, it's a lot of work. And, I filmed for CATV, but Bob Gear, you served on the board with me for a few years. And so, yeah, the corrections would always come in and they would always be acted on and corrected. Okay. When I made my correction this time around, Miranda looked at me and said, my gosh, you have never, ever sent anything in throughout all of those years. But I need to say this, June 22nd, Rod gave his report about wanting to hire a police chief and to do it, not to take his time, but to hire a police chief and then have the police chief then build his own department from the ground up. And my actual comment was, we cannot afford that luxury this time around. We need to hire the 2 police officers and the chief and hope that in our diligence, we hire a chief that can work with those officers. And that's not what was quoted. What was quoted was, Demo said that we should hire a police chief soon. Well, there's a big far cry from what I said to what was put down there. So therefore, I submitted my corrections. Now, you just took a vote basically to say you're going to accept the draft and not even consider my corrections. And that is wrong. That is wrong. Okay, we've never done it that way before. And why we're doing it that way now, I don't understand. I for one, have never. I've looked at it from a different point of view. I said, well, having been in those shoes and filming those meetings and stuff, but, this stuff gets recorded. And what I actually said, and I watched the tape myself, went back and said, this is pieces of what I actually said, condensed version. And that should be put in for the record. That's all I've got to say there.
Great. Thank you for your public comment, which has the benefit of being part of the record. Thank you, Demo. Charlotte, and then we need to move on from our consent agenda. Thank you so much, Demo.
You're welcome.
Is she muted?
She is.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You noticed that I had some comments too, changes to the minutes. And I did them exactly as I did because Miranda got back to me when I wrote to her and mentioned them and said that I had to specify the particular part of the meeting which was being quoted, and where I had changes, I had to make them. And I did exactly what I was told to do by the town manager's assistant. And yet you are saying that the changes to the minutes that I asked for will be ignored because
I think what we agreed as a process is that we would have to make a motion to include the corrections in it. That's what we agreed as a process, and now I have a motion on the table.
Well, that's exactly what she said. Was that the select board would have to approve.
That's right.
Those changes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're clarifying a process. I have a motion on the table. Should I call the question or else? We're in discussion. Go ahead, Marcia.
Can you read the motion or repeat it?
It was to approve the draft minutes.
Without corrections or with corrections?
Just as presented in the packet.
Okay. So I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm gonna try this one more time. All right. Okay. I'm gonna try this one more time. If we want to use corrections, if we want to take the correspondence that our residents had on their corrections for the minutes, we would have to make a motion that included their corrections. I have a motion that includes an approval of draft minutes that implies there are no corrections. Okay, so that's what I have on the table. I am happy to call the question on that or else. This is in discussion. Go ahead, Marcia.
Friendly amendment to approve them with the corrections posted by Demo and Charlotte.
Okay, now Mary would have to.
The select board meeting. Bye.
I'm going to mute Charlotte. Sorry. So there was an amendment. Someone has to accept Marcia's amendment, and if not, that's fine.
I am not going to accept the amendment.
Okay. So I think, so what I'm saying, but we've communicated very clearly to our public, I hope, that we want correspondence. We want correspondence on their corrections. If they have them, the board will make motions to add them as part of the approval of the minutes, if necessary. Any one board member can do that, but we don't have that right now. We're just going to approve the draft minutes, okay? So I'm going to call that question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so I'll roll call. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
No.
And I'm a yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to move us on with thanks. Okay. We have the town manager's report. I see hands. I'm moving us on.
We have correspondence.
Oh, we have correspondence. Oh my gosh, because we're not yet through the agenda. Is there a motion can someone make a motion to approve the correspondence?
I move to approve the correspondence.
Okay, made by Mary. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by second by Rob. Any discussion on correspondence? Go ahead, Marcia.
I'd like to pull the Karen Ness correspondence.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So we don't have to pull anything. We're just discussing the correspondence. So what would you like to say about it?
Basically, I had some questions. I looked back at the auditor's report that we just had, and I couldn't find anything about monthly tax payments being a problem. So apparently, monthly tax payments have been an ongoing thing for years, at least for one person in the community. So I'd like to know what's happening with that, why it's a problem now, and also what happened to this person's April check. Was it ever sent back to her? What happened?
Okay, so Fielding is here, so perhaps he can address that. He raised his hand, and I'm sure Rob would be fine with that. So go ahead, Fielding. Would you like to answer the questions that came up in this correspondence that Marcia's asking us about?
Yes, thanks, Roger. I believe what Karen is referencing is actually, so I issued tax overpayment refunds just a couple weeks ago. This was brought up by the auditor. It was a point of contention she brought up when she presented to you all in a select board meeting. Historically, the town has allowed for monthly tax payments to be made. However, when they result in a credit balance being owed to the taxpayer within a given fiscal year, which often is created after the second payment deadline has passed, that then creates an overpayment situation. And if you recall, the auditor was not okay with us continuing that practice. I have spoken with more than just one taxpayer, and that now that the tax bills for the current fiscal year have been issued, they can certainly make monthly payments from here on out. But if it does result in an overpayment situation, we are not okay for our auditors to continue that practice. So I hope that provides some clarification. It strictly has to deal with overpayment scenarios.
Okay. Do you have a quick follow-up, Marcia?
Yeah. So the second part of my question was what happened to her April check?
My understanding is that when Lacey spoke with her, that we shredded the check. We don't have it. We haven't kept it. We never cashed it. So that's my understanding as to what happened to it.
So I think Marcia's raising, I think we should, this is a correspondence that should get an answer or a reply. I imagine that this has been, I believe that this has been explained and the resident is communicating their frustration to us, but nonetheless, I think we would appreciate that they appreciate knowing that they received the clarity that we just had, or that they have the benefit of getting that explanation that we just had. So if it hasn't been done, please do so, I guess might be what I might say. And Marcia's nodding. So thank you, Marcia. Mary, do you have a comment on this?
I have
on the correspondence?
I have a question on this particular correspondence, yes.
Okay.
If a payment plan is allowed within a certain time frame so that there's not overpayment, how is a resident supposed to know that? Like what's the communication to a resident that needs a payment plan? And it sounds as though if you make one or two payments too far into a certain time period, it's going to result in an overpayment. Is there a way to structure a payment plan so that does not happen?
Certainly, and that conversation happens at the beginning of the payment plan. It is something we certainly do with our delinquent taxpayers when we set them up on payment plans. In several instances, though, it has just been a recurring payment that automatically comes. I don't know if they set it up automatically through their bank account or what have you, but in certain instances, it does create an overpayment scenario, which unfortunately we're not allowed to do. So I'm certainly happy to speak with any taxpayer and set up a monthly payment plan that will not result in an overpayment scenario. And based on each person's unique tax bill, we can set up that specific amount. That's very easy to do.
Go ahead, Marcia. Do you have a question? And then we should try to move on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's some way that would be helpful to the finance office and to people if information about payment plans could somehow be included in the mailing for the taxes, because taxes are getting higher, and I can imagine lots of people want to take advantage of this and simultaneously use that sort of mechanism to set up something that is going to be easy for you to follow, so that you're not doing a lot of crazy, checking back to see what people are doing.
I think Fielding, in the interest of time, you should let's say that you should take that under advisement, right? If that's okay, Marcia, because I think it's yes, we might not want to be able to offer a service that overburdens our town, but also I think obviously monthly payments reduce the burden of taxes. So I think that's a good point, and thank you. Okay, so can I call the question in our correspondence? Okay. All right. All in favor of approving the correspondence, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. That was wonderful. All right. So I think Marcia said she had to step away for a little bit, so we'll allow her to. Oh, no, you're good? Yes. I'll let you.
No, I have to go. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, I'll let you step away while we hear the town manager's report. Let me just bring Rod over. Thank you, Fielding, for your help with that correspondence. Greetings, Rod. We're here for the town manager's report in our agenda in our July 13th meeting.
Thank you. So thanks for the queuing up, Roger. Sorry. I'm trying to be Miranda as well here because there's no one taking minutes. So, okay. So you see my town manager's report. People have made comments on it in the public comment section of tonight's meeting. I want to let people know that I have, since the last time we were together, proceeded with advertising officer positions, patrol officer positions with the Criminal Justice Council website, which is the kind of go-to place for law enforcement recruitment in Vermont, but also on Indeed.com, and we're beginning to receive applications from Indeed in the last 6 hours. And I've done a preliminary interview with a candidate for the chief position. I'm hoping to get some feedback from friends and colleagues in the law enforcement community as to the suitability of the candidate before we proceed. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to make progress on the recruitment front very soon. I spent some time speaking with my colleague, the town manager for the town of Thetford to the north. We have a good working relationship with that police department. The current chief is a former officer for Norwich, and we have a commitment that they will be around and available to help us out in the coming weeks while we deal with the staffing situation. And so I look forward to their cooperation as well and appreciate it deeply. And so just to clarify my remarks made at the last meeting in June, by working well, what I meant was we are enjoying cordial relations with our peer organizations and particularly the support of Vermont State Police. And I want to publicly thank Officer Ingraham for her dedication and dependability. She stayed calm under a very stressful situation, and we all appreciate her effort. And so we're working as diligently as we can to move past the situation that we're in. But I think by working well, what I meant was under very trying and difficult circumstances, the Vermont State Police, the Town of Hartford Police Department, and the Town of Thetford Police Department, along with the Norwich Police Department, have been working really well together under the circumstances, which are difficult, and I want to acknowledge that they're difficult. I see Lieutenant O'Donnell here from the Vermont State Police. If you'd like to comment, I'm happy to share the mic with him. Other than that, I've also been working, you'll see somewhere else in the packet, we've got a proposal for an auditor, which was something that the finance director and I have been very anxious about and working very hard on resolving. We finally have a viable proposal from a well-respected firm in Montpelier, and there's a recommendation to approve that agreement. The RFQ for the space analysis for Tracy Hall is out and circulating. I've been working with Jeff Martin and signed a contract with a HVAC and buildings energy systems consultant who will be able to provide us with short-term and medium-term advice on what to do about the boilers in Tracy Hall. His work has already commenced. Been working with Chris Kaufman and various vendors on the Moore Lane Bridge situation, which continues to be difficult and challenging. We are working with Clean Harbors, the vendor, to make sure that the very temporary measures that we put in place are going to be effective. We have established that despite the appearance from casually driving over the bridge or walking over the bridge, it is actually more like a strainer or a drain than it is like a road. A significant amount of water that hits the bridge makes its way straight through the blacktop and then through the wooden structure that is the bridge deck. With it, it flushes out the creosote and hits either the brook or the concrete bridge abutments on the way down. It's challenging to think about what even the viable temporary solutions are for this problem. We are yet to receive advice or direction from the Department of Environmental Conservation. We expect that soon, but in the meantime, we're making every effort that we can to prevent the material from making its way to the brook, given the very limited range of options that we've got. I think that about covers where I've been. I don't have anything else to report. Except for the fact that I've also advertised the planning and zoning director position, and yet to receive a response on that, but it's only been out a week or so. So I'm looking forward to getting responses to that. And so then that will be one less vacant position and one less job that I'm doing. So, or two less jobs, perhaps.
So Rod,
I'm happy to take any questions or to hand it over to Lieutenant O'Donnell if he'd like to make any kind of remarks.
Lieutenant O'Donnell, did you want to share the mic to borrow Rod Francis's term?
I was just planning on coming to these meetings. It's the first one I've been able to attend. So just to see, to hear public comment and just to see what's going on in town, just because I live close by anyways. So I'm not necessarily here to answer questions or give any comments, just watching and seeing how things are going.
Okay, that's lovely. And I would turn your attention to the packet as well that also talks about policing more broadly too. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I'm referring to correspondence. People seem confused. So yes.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I have a question for you, Rod, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because this is just like a general matter, and then I see Mary and Marcia have comments.
Yep.
One, I think one of the things I often hear from people is that they haven't been able to get a response within, usually within 1 to 3 business days, which I think is which is unfair only in the context. And obviously what we just heard from your report is there's quite a lot of prolific work being done. So I have 2 questions. Like, one, what board support can be offered to you at this time where it's clear that the workload by you and everyone else who remain with us in town is high? And are there any sort of technical fixes that you and how you have advised staff? Is there an automatic message that sort of says thank you for your message? I expect to be able to get back to you, within, at this point, 5 to 7 days at minimum, right? Is there a communication that is there an expectation that we an expectation that we can communicate to our public very clearly and consistently, so we can ask them to work with us?
Yeah, I think that the easiest thing for me to do is to sort of formulate an automatic message that indicates to people that due to the workload and the staff available to respond, that they should reasonably expect a longer time frame for responses. There are many different kinds of questions, and some of them are actually quite involved and require quite a bit of background work before they can be answered, even though on the surface they're quite simple. And then, yes, I'm performing the role of the zoning administrator, the planning director, still responsible for a lot of the vendor relations that we have to provide essential services like the network, the infrastructure around our information technology and those sorts of things. So yeah, I have some really serious demands, and I think that it would be fairer for the public for them to get a reminder as an automatic reply that due to the workload and the number of people available to do it, they should reasonably expect a longer time. So a lot of stuff is time sensitive and a lot of it is triage. Sometimes I can answer people quite quickly. Some people have gotten used to seeing answers to their zoning questions on Sunday night or Saturday morning. That'll probably continue. Generally, the planning and zoning work is done between noon on Thursday and 5 p.m. on Sunday. So that's generally the time frame that people should reasonably expect. So if you've got a zoning or land use question, that's when you're likely to see it. If you've got a different question from a different aspect of my work, you're probably going to see it between Sunday at 5 and Thursday at noon.
Well, when you formalize any of this, please let us know. So when we hear from our community, we can support it, support the statement. It's not to say that it's a company line. It's to say that we're all in this together. Mary, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, a question for Rod, excuse me. Getting the R's mixed up. So in your efforts to, sorry, I know, thanks for the visual. In your efforts to find some other people to help locate a police chief candidate who would work for Norwich. My question is, are you going to ask Officer Ingram to be part of that effort? And I don't think that's appropriate, but she will end up having to work with the police chief. So I'm asking you anyway.
Yes. So to be clear, right now we're doing some very preliminary reviews, and then if it's a viable candidate, then yes, they'll be meeting Officer Ingraham very soon in the process. And because it's such a small department and because she's the sole officer right now, she's a key person to get to know. And I think it's important that both people feel comfortable with each other and can figure out a way of working together, because it's going to be them. I should further note that, and this is probably, Officer Ingraham already knows this, but if it's an officer from out of state, or if it's a law enforcement, career law enforcement person from out of state, they will be required to go through a review and accreditation process with the Vermont Criminal Justice Commission. So there'll be some requirements will be waived on the basis of what background and certifications they have, but they won't be a fully sworn officer when they fully turn up. And that means that they will be accompanied by Officer Ingraham in circumstances where a fully sworn officer is going to be needed to do the work. So it is a key relationship to get right, and I hope to involve Officer Ingraham as soon as possible.
Do you have also, Rod, any idea of the time frame for completing the training? And I know it's impacted by shortages, I think, at the academy. Are we talking a year, you think, or?
I've had discussions with Trevor Whipple, a former police chief who now works as a consultant for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. He's familiar with the current police chief from the city of Montpelier, who had apparently an excellent career background in Illinois, and has gone through the waiver process and is waiting for training, and is not yet able to be to work as a fully sworn officer. And he's been in the post for more than a year. Okay. So it's a budgetary issue for us. It's a workplace issue for us. It's a work management issue for us. It's a serious consideration to undertake. And I want to emphasize that at this point, I've had one show of interest from one officer this evening, just before the meeting started, from within the state of Vermont. And up until that point, the closest I got was New York State. The rest were further afield. Right. And so I need to emphasize again that we'll be making the best decision that we possibly can, but we should recognize the possibility that even when we have a chief, we're not going to be working at full capacity with regard to shift assignments and other things for some time until they're a fully sworn officer. Which is a burden that the department will carry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Marcia, or thank you, Mary and Rod. Marcia, sorry, I'm not Rob. I didn't say Rob that time. Sorry. Go ahead, Marcia. It's your turn now. Marcia,
it's the only other choice you've got, Roger.
I know. I hope, as long as I don't call any of you Claudette, then I think we'll be good. Go ahead, Marcia.
Thank you. So I have a question for Officer O'Donnell. A thank you for Officer Ingram again. We really appreciate all that you're doing. And then a couple of questions for Rod. So for Officer O'Donnell, I'm just assuming that the local barracks are the ones that are helping Norwich. And I'm, as you've guessed or have seen, this is a particularly distressing time for the town, and people are anxious. So I'm wondering, how many other towns are in this situation that the local barracks is assisting at this moment?
Right now, I believe there's 3 other towns in the state. Our barracks, you're the only one in our current coverage area that's experiencing this. I think Springfield is probably the closest, and that's covered by Westminster. So that's not affecting our specific barracks. I mean, we do help cover their shifts in Westminster and back and forth to different barracks, but there's a couple towns up in the Chittenden County area, and then Springfield, Vermont, and then you guys.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And just to be clarify, that doesn't include, or I guess this is a question, does that not include what the sheriff's department picks up for coverage? So it might be interesting to explain how the Vermont State Police is providing coverage for us, but then how does the sheriff's office provide for area towns?
So the sheriffs don't provide general police coverage. unless the town pays for that in an overtime contract situation. I can say most of the sheriff's departments have dropped a lot of their contracts because of staffing. They can't fill those. So a lot of the towns that they maybe have covered in the past are no longer covering as much. And usually the coverage is only part-time. It's not a full-time 24-hour coverage type situation for those towns. So
when the
it could
sheriff,
be 5 hours a week, it could be 20 hours a week, it could be 40. It really depends on the sheriff's department and how they're able to staff or manage those contracts.
so I just want to be clear. So, because I think this is, this is such a multifaceted, the topic of police coverage is so multifaceted, right? So when a sheriff's department drops their coverage for a town, whether it be full-time or part-time, they may not, then that community may go without coverage, is what I'm hearing.
So we still have a lot of towns in our coverage that don't have police. A lot of small towns that don't have a lot of calls that we've always gone to. And generally the sheriff's department do more of a traffic coverage than they do full law enforcement coverage. And that's totally town to town and situational. So in those hours, we don't, when we look at towns that have police departments, we count that as a town that has, so like Royalton PD has 2 or 3 officers depending on staffing. We count that for us as a town that has police coverage. So when they're not around and we get calls for non-emergent issues, we hold that for them, similar to what we're doing with you guys. But the sheriff's department generally don't do that. If they're not in town and they're not taking calls, we're taking those calls. It's just a different setup. The town doesn't manage their police department. It's considered an overtime contract. So it's a much different kind of setup than what we have with you guys right now, or what we have with general towns in place.
Right. So the setup that we have now with you is unique to this area, but the question of coverage that you're providing is broad, and departments are down more widely, and that you're providing lots of different kinds of coverage. Okay. So I just wanted to, people sort of hold these answers, up, right? And I want to not dismiss them, but I want to embrace the complication. But I've totally co-opted Marcia's time for questions. So go ahead, Marcia.
Just to follow up based on all of that. So I'm assuming that there's a triage process so that if you've got multiple things going on and there's something horrific going on in Norwich, maybe that gets elevated.
So we would do it like any other thing. We emergent calls are things that we're responding to in your town, but like alarms and things that aren't necessarily criminal in nature that you would get from the local PD, we're not coming to those. If somebody calls because they're getting assaulted or something, we're coming to that. There's no question. But know that our response time could be 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It just depends on where the 2 or 3 troopers that I have in the area, where they are and what they're in the middle of, whether they can break free immediately or not. So really, I think that's some of the things that, I know somebody earlier talked about a 25-minute response time. That's with police officers in town. You're looking at, I could have a trooper sitting there on the interstate in Norwich and it could be 5 minutes, but we could be tied up in Rochester and it could be an hour or more. So it really varies so drastically, even in an emergency situation, on how quick our response could be. But if it's an emergent situation, we're coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm glad that we were able to.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad we were able to answer these questions with Officer O'Donnell. I know that we've previously gotten these answers, but nonetheless, it's great to hear it from the law enforcement questions from law enforcement officers. So anything, you have questions for Rod now, Marcia?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right. So more mundane things, back to bridges.
Great.
So I'm wondering if we have inspected other bridges in town to rule out similar problems to the Moore Lane Bridge. And last week or whenever, I had asked about insurance coverage for the Moore Lane Bridge and if you had explored that. So those 2 questions, please.
Rod, what about the second question first?
Yep. I have an email in to somebody from Passive and have not heard back yet. I can give them a prompt. Passive is our insurance provider in this regard. We have not done a physical inspection of other bridges. There are many, more than 100. And what we're relying on there is we have an inventory of bridges. And we have basically condition reports for all the other bridges, and they were physically inspected within the last 2 years. And Moore Lane was identified then as having an issue. As far as we know, none of the other bridges are contributing in the way, contributing in an issue like this, the way the Moore Lane Bridge is. So this is the only one we're aware of at this point. And then, yeah, so that's what we're addressing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that is good. We can maybe move on, if that's all right. Thank you for that report, and thank you for the the space needs assessment update. So just to be clear, that will really only be for questions relating to energy, really, the Jeff Martin work that you and the consultant, the contractor that you hired. Then you also have an RFQ for the space as well, right?
Yeah, I have a space and so the Marcus Jones, the consultant that we've retained to do the analysis of the boilers and the HVAC and ventilation questions, is aware of the RFQ for the space analysis.
Okay.
I should also point out and remind you that he's going to look at the town highway garage, which is also a major vector, if you like, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It's got a heating system that's fueled by propane. It's an extremely large structure, and it has minimal insulation to none. And so we're looking also making sure that if there are simple and straightforward things we can do to improve our performance there and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, that we can talk about that. But the most of his focus is Tracy Hall, and he's going to be presenting information in such a way that if there was to be a rearrangement of space, internal space in Tracy Hall, that the work that he's providing would be compatible with that.
Okay, that's great. Progress on that. Okay, so we'll move on unless we're good, board members, or.
Yes, thank you.
That was a lot. Thanks, Rod. All right. So next we have authorized contract with Sullivan Powers and Company for auditing services. Would it be appropriate to begin with a motion and then we'll have a discussion?
I think so.
Great.
I move to authorize the town manager to enter an agreement on behalf of the town with Sullivan Powers and Company for auditing services for an estimated cost of $28,000 for 2022, with a cost escalator for subsequent years. 2023 would be $28,600. 2024 would be $29,100. 2025 would be $30,000, and 2026 would also be $30,000.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Okay, any discussion? Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I was wondering about the timeline. I think it seems like a very reputable firm. I feel confident in it. Just looking at the timeline, I believe it said draft audit would be guaranteed by January 31st. And I'm wondering, and then, it could be approved quickly by us if we agree to do that. But what I'm wondering is that deadline sufficient, if all that fell into place, just to, include information about the audit in the town report, the timing of it, because there's the production of the town report. You see what I mean? Like the warrant, I think our warrant, yes. We're always thinking, well, the budget, we usually have a January 20th, I think, deadline for the warrant, but I don't know the deadlines for the town report. So I wanted to ask about that.
Okay, so why don't, Rod, can you hold off? Because I'm gonna note these kinds of questions, and then so we can get them all in one foul swoop. How's that? Okay, so because Marcia also has probably a question, right? Go ahead, Marcia.
Of course. Thank you. So I'm wondering, I've got several questions. Is this the actual only proposal that we had? And the amount that's budgeted seems like, if I remember correctly, about like twice what we had been paying before.
Yep.
So that's of concern because we haven't budgeted for that. And I'm just kind of concerned about going with a new company and agreeing to 4 years when, you know, we're starting out and we don't even know how this is going to work. I'd be much more comfortable with 1 year. So, and I'd be even more comfortable if I knew that this wasn't the only company that had made a proposal.
Okay, these are all good questions. Thank you, Marcia. Rob, did you have any questions? Okay, if you didn't, I didn't.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we then like answer the questions for discussion? So, Rod and Fielding, was this the only bid? And
Yep.
how does this? Yes, that's easy. This is, I believe, double, as Marcia noted, right? Any context for that?
Yeah, let me explain. So yes, we put the order for services RFP out, and we got exactly 0 responses. Then, which was somewhat unexpected and very disappointing. Fielding then attended a conference of his colleagues and peers across the state, hosted by the state, and was able to make a connection with somebody who also then provided him with a list of firms that had been, had worked in the field before. And we basically worked through the list and cold call people until we found a firm that was willing to contemplate it. And Fielding then engaged with them back and forth. They had worked for us before many years ago, so they're familiar with the town. Well, I'm familiar with their work with other towns, and so they gave us a price proposal, a cost proposal. It was something of a surprise, but not a shock. And it's significantly more than we paid for last year. We expected to pay much more than we paid last year. I think we budgeted in the realm of $18,000 to $20,000, and this is significantly over that. It's the reality of the market that we're in. This is the only live option that we have. We need to make a decision soon. The financial year is already in. We need to get the books to them so that we can turn an audit around. The contract, I think Fielding can back me up here or correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the contract is for 5 years, but there's a clause that allows either party to decide that they don't want to have anything to do with the other party after the first year and walk away. So I feel like there are enough caveats built into the contract that would allow us, if we were unsatisfied with the result, to look at our options then, but we definitely need to lock in an audit now. And then lastly, Mary's question about the production dates. Mm-hmm. The warrant needs to be finalized by around January 20th. Right. That goes into the packet, to the town report. The audit, we just scraped in. We sort of waited for the audit. It was the last piece to come in last year. It was sort of a nail biter, but that was, I believe it was February the 13th that we received.
Okay. All right. So January 31st is not an outlandish timeframe.
We're both Fielding and I are hoping that they can beat January 31st. I think that they've expressed a deep concern that it would be pretty challenging for them to beat January the 31st, but we're confident that if we work with them well, we'll get an answer before the 31st. And that's enough of a buffer so that we can turn it around and put it in the town report and have the town report available. So we're comfortable with the dates.
Good. Thank you for answering the question.
Another question that Marcia asked, but it was kind of addressed, is this is double. I think we did budget for 15. Is it fair to sort of ask how do we compensate for the individual line item? technically we're going over in this line item. Obviously, voters approve a bottom line budget, so and we need an audit, so that's fine. But how
does it work?
Yeah, tell us more.
Some lines in the budget will be over, and some lines in the budget will be under. The challenge comes, at the end. We obviously don't want to overspend the budget in total, but we will continue to show the line as overspent, and then to use a overworn phrase, it's the bottom line that really counts, and we don't expect the bottom line to be in the negative. We expect it to be significantly in the positive. So we think, we're not thrilled that we're paying, $28,000 for something that we thought we'd get for 18 or 15. But, given that we've got exactly no choices, this is the deal that we've got. So that, from the point of view of showing it in the budget, yes, it'll show as an individual line that is overspent. We'll have other lines that are overspent, and we frequently do. The way it's shown in the budget is that line is overspent. The question is what happens to the bottom line.
Okay. Any other follow-up? And then I'll call the question. Go ahead. I see your hand, Marcia.
Yeah, they put in 5 or 6 pages of clients, but none of them list this year. It seems like they may have had a lot of clients, but it doesn't look like they've necessarily kept all of those clients. And then it's just a little niggly thing, but it sort of caught my eye. The cover letter says that the person is the contact person and authorized to bind the firm, but nobody signs the letter. It's just signed by the name of the company. I just find that a little sloppy and unnerving.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Cheryl, I see your hand. I'll take your public comment and then maybe I'll call the question. Good, Cheryl. You're looking for that mute button?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Roger. Cheryl Lindbergh, and I'm at 59 Koch Road. Just as treasurer, I would say on Rod's point to the overall budget that he's correct, except I do believe we approve a certain expenditure budget at town meeting. So I believe that's all that's authorized to be spent in total, the total expenditure budget. Regardless, if the revenues come in way over, we've got an expenditure budget that's been approved. So I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Right. Voters don't approve revenues. They approve expenditures. Yes. A good perennial reminder too. Thank you, Cheryl. Go ahead, Marcia, and then we really need to call the question.
Just wondering if Cheryl has any familiarity with this firm.
Yes, I do have familiarity with the firm, and I do find them to be a reputable firm. I've known Fred Duplessis for a long time. He's a part of an organization that Rod was mentioning earlier, where Fielding went to the meeting, excuse me, and that's the Vermont Government Finance Officers Association, and Fred is a member of that. He's done presentations. I do find him of late to be an expensive firm to get, but I believe it's, it's again, as Rod was saying, it's the sign of the times, unfortunately. I would hope that there had been more than one response as well.
Right. All right. Thanks so much, Cheryl. All right. So I am going to call the question on this question to sign this contract for this firm. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rod and Fielding, for your work in getting us an auditor. It seems like no easy thing to have done. Okay, so I'm noticing that we now have an executive session, and then we have a select board vacancy, and then we have another executive session. So I'm happy to reorder the agenda by consensus, which we can do during a meeting by by an agreement of the board. So can we reorder the agenda to then talk about the vacancy next? Can we do that?
Good idea.
Yeah.
I'm seeing by consensus that we're going to do that. So our next
You want a
item-
motion?
I think it's always good to do that. So would you like to make that motion?
I move that we reorder the agenda to put the select board vacancy as item number 7.
Yes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Marcia, Mary, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. First time for that. Great. So now we'll move on to our reordered agenda, select board vacancy. All right. So I hope Marcia that you noticed when the Valley in the Valley News that the use of forthwith was in my comment, because I that is what the law says that we are to make, and I did that very much for you because we do need to make a vacancy forthwith, right? And so that means that we have to show deliberation in doing so. VLCT has provided some guidance on that. I think we should talk about a couple of things, right? The first question might be, how would we like to make an appointment for the vacant seat? Our usual appointment process is to get applications and to review them at a meeting. Would we like to do that? And then if so, what else would we like to do for this vacancy? Or if we don't want to do that, then feel free to say that too. So go ahead, Mary.
I think before getting too much into that, we should also discuss the time frame within which we want to make this decision. For instance, Bonnie, our town clerk, was pointing out that if we would like to have call a special election that occurred, for instance, during the November primary. Mm-hmm. The deadline for organizing that is August 9th. Mm-hmm. So it's just the logistics, not only of how to find a person who would be willing to serve, but also when to choose that person, and also how much of an interim time frame would there be before the voters would have the chance to elect a new select board member. So right. It could be town meeting, but it could be quicker than that. It could be that midterm election that would drop a new select board member kind of at the beginning of our budget process. So it would be a little bit like, an eye opener, I think, for a new select board member, but just to consider those things as we make our decision.
Right, Mary, you're providing great clarity with things. So basically, my understanding is it's until election can be held. And so that we always have our town meeting day election, right? But if we were to do an election in November, we would have to actually call a special meeting. And if we were to call a special meeting, we need to tell our clerk, and we would have to convene a special meeting. So our vacancy. I'm sorry.
If it were that, or if we wanted that November date, it would have to be August 9th. So that's a lot of time pressure on us. That's saying.
Right. And I think you made a good point about whether or not, if we hold an election. Anyway, you made a good point. Thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Any other comments in light of Mary's clarity? I'm sorry. I hear yes. Can you say your name? I don't know who 916 is.
It's Bonnie.
Oh, hello, Bonnie. Hi. Would you like to add some clarity? We were discussing town meeting, special meetings.
I understand. I've been listening.
Great.
You are supposed to appoint forthwith in the event that you don't, and you choose to have a special town meeting in November, you can, but the person that you appoint will have to run again.
Right.
I'm not sure when Claudette's term ended, but they would have to run for the remainder of her term. Or if they chose vacancy stay on regardless. They would have to run in that seat.
Right. That's right. Yes. Thank you. Yep. Yes. Thank you, Bonnie. Absolutely. And yes, and Claudette, I think, had another 18 months, right? She was a couple months into a 2-year term. Go ahead, Marcia.
So just thinking about possible ways that this could happen in terms of an appointment or seeking interest.
Mm-hmm.
There was only one person who ran in the last election who wasn't seated, and that was Pam Smith. So if she were still interested, people did vote for her, and she expressed an interest by running. So we could appoint her, and then I understand from the Secretary of State's office that the VLCT and that office agree that the next election really means the next election for that office, which would be March. But we could run a special if we wanted to. So to some extent, if we appointed the person who ran before and who did receive votes, then we would be moving expeditiously. And then we could decide whether or not we were going to run a special for November or not.
Okay, so let's separate these. So we're talking about how to deal with the vacancy, and then when we want to call the election. Why don't we talk about when we want to call the election first, and then what we want to do about the vacancy? Does that make sense? Is that an easier thing to do? Do we want to call special? Do we want to request that we do a special meeting in November, or do we want to otherwise go until March for this vacancy? Go ahead, Mary. Did you have an answer for that?
I have a kind of a point of view on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to me, perhaps the good part about or sort of some support for the idea of having a special election in November, I think it might give the electorate more of a feeling of control, because I think people are so kind of feeling as though their town is falling apart. So it might give people more of a sense of control if they were able to, elect a person to that vacancy. I think as far as us doing our work, it might be more stability for us if we appointed a person who could get used to being on the select board. And there are some things about that are very different from just being a regular citizen. The open meeting law and lots of things are very different. You have to kind of get used to it. And also, if we appointed someone and then got a new person right before the budget season, the new person would have to sort of get oriented and then jump right into the budget. So I think for us, it would be more stability if, we had the election for a select board person during the town meeting timeframe. So, and as much as I'm concerned with how worried people are in town, and I know that that's been described by at least one resident as gaslighting, which I do not appreciate. I sincerely am concerned for the people of this town, but I also think as select board members, we need to also have some stability for us to do our work. So I would argue strongly for having the election part of it be at the town meeting. And and that was what we were talking about, the time frame, right? That's my perspective on the time frame.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Can we, Rob and Marcia, can we talk about the time frame a little bit? Rob, do you have thoughts? Go ahead, Bonnie. Sorry, it's just hard with the phone. But go ahead. I think you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I read the statute as forthwith, and to me, it sounds as if you should appoint someone at least until the next town meeting. Mm-hmm. If you were to do an election in November, that means you're leaving that seat vacant from now until November.
Okay, so thank you, Bonnie. So we were separating the questions a little bit. We know we want to make, we know that we have to make an appointment forthwith, and we're going to talk about how we're going to do that. But first, I want to talk about when we want to hold an election, because even though, as you've pointed out to us, even though we make an appointment to a vacancy, we only are doing so until an election. So we're just talking about when we want to, if we want to have.
No, Roger, until the next town election, which would be next March. You are creating a special election for November.
Yes, we understand.
We're not having.
Yes,
okay.
we know that, and we know that we also have to let you know that, right? And I know that you obviously want to know sooner rather than later, but that's indeed what we're discussing.
Well, it sounds to me like you're putting the cart before the horse. You should be making your appointment regardless of what happens in November, because whoever you appoint will be appointed until next month.
Not if we have an election in November.
And are you going to do that for the one seat?
That's literally what we're discussing, but yes. Yep.
That doesn't make much sense to me, but
well, thank you. Yes, thank you, Bonnie. I think Mary was actually teasing that out a little bit. She was suggesting that an earlier election might be good for a mood in the town, right? Like make voters feel like they have a say in their representation, and that might be. And we have to weigh that, of course, with the burden that comes with having a special election. So we'll just. And
then you run.
Go ahead.
You run the chance of uprooting the person that you appoint.
Yep.
In the midst of budget season, rather than have the continuity of having one person present throughout budgeting.
That's exact, and that was, I believe that was the point that Mary was making. It would be good for the budget and for the continuity of this group to make until the next town election, right, which would be March. So you're effectively summarizing what we're doing, which I really appreciate. Okay, so thank you, Rob and Marcia. Do you have thoughts?
So I think the November timeframe is just too tight to have a good election where people have time to think about whether or not they want to run and so on. And we still have to make the decisions about who we appoint. So I'd be more partial to appointing someone till the March, the normal town meeting, at which they would have to run again if they chose, or other people could compete.
I'm thinking what I'm hearing, just to really be quick on the second question, I think we all are saying March. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah, I'm hearing that. Yeah. Okay.
Good. So then, good.
That's great. So we're gonna make. So now let's talk about how to make the appointment, the forthwith appointment, until March. How would we like to do that? Go ahead, Mary.
I would like to sort of cast a wider net than the person, than Pam, although I think she should certainly throw her hat in the ring if she wants to. It could also be former select board members that might want to step in on an interim basis, and they would already be familiar with some of the structure. So I'd like to have some mechanism, I don't know, maybe what we do for committees, but I don't want it to drag on. It's got to be turned around pretty quickly as far as people knowing that it's a position that's available and being able to submit their application in a good time frame, just so we can satisfy the forthwith part.
Yes. So Rob, I want to hear from you because Mary and Marcia have spoken on this. So I want to hear from you, and then we can move on to the sort of part B of that.
So I think we should set a deadline for making a decision of the next meeting and accept applications, encourage applications until then. But the next meeting should be the point at which we make that decision.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Marcia, anything else that you would like to say on that particular point?
Yeah, I think that we really need to Mary's point about the mood in the town and transparency. I think it would be important that whoever is appointed hasn't served on the board before. We need to have more viewpoints, new blood. We need to have, we need people in town to feel that they have a say. So I'd like to see somebody new. And I recognize that there is a learning curve, but everybody I know can do this.
There's a learning curve and challenging burdens at this time. I think it has to be said that there's some challenging burdens and that any applicants to this position needs to take on both the challenges of getting up to speed and the burdens and knowledge that we have at this moment. So yes, thank you. So all right. So what I'm hearing is an application. Is there anything we would like to do other than our usual application?
What do you suggest? I
think the regular application is good, but I want to hear what all of you think. Go ahead, Marcia.
I would like to see us indicate that we'd like someone who hasn't served before, and to stipulate that they absolutely have to appear to discuss their candidacy in front of us, because we've had situations where people didn't come, and I think this is not a time for people to assume that they can just throw their hat in the ring and not be present.
I think the latter question, without doubt, we all agree with that. We want to talk to whomever our new colleague is.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead, Mary.
I won't agree to the idea that it shouldn't be someone who's run before, just because we don't know who we're going to get.
Right.
So it's just, let's kind of have a wider net. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I have a technical question, Rod. Miranda is away, right? And I don't know the mechanisms for checking Selectboard right? So in our usual method is to get applications sent to that. Should we be deviating at all? Should they be sent to me as chair to make sure that all are received and responded to and be part of a packet? What would be best on a technical point?
The email should be addressed to you, Roger.
Okay. All right. So why don't we begin? So what I'm hearing is we'll begin advertising for a vacancy to be the appointment to be made on July 27th at our next meeting. And I will receive them, I will acknowledge them, and then I will make sure they're part of the packet. And if it's okay, I want to say, I'm going to work with Mary to write some listserv posts, to make sure that listserv posts go out more than, once or twice, but frequently. Mm-hmm. And if Mary can share, I want board members to know that Mary will share in that duty of advertising it. So if that's okay, then I'll just take public comments if we have a plan.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, Cheryl, go ahead. Oh, Marcia, did you have a comment?
Do we need a motion?
Well, let me take two public comments and then we'll make a motion. But thank you.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I've been around a while, and I will tell you that history of this type of a situation, which has occurred by deaths and unfortunate situations, the select board, remaining members of the select board did go to the most recent elections and did look to appoint someone that had run, who has, received votes and was a viable candidate. So if you could go back to the records, you will find, Mary in particular, that this was a common practice amongst the select board over the years. Thank you.
Good to know. Thanks, Cheryl.
Michael Costa, go ahead.
I wholeheartedly support an application process to try to draw in new candidates. However, I just hear a tension between wanting to attract and recruit new people that may not have considered town service and appointing someone on the 27th. 2 weeks in the summer is a really quick turnaround to try to find new people that may have not considered themselves municipal leaders. So I understand the select board has business to conduct, but there would seem to be a tension in the goal and the time frame. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I don't. The statute has some flexibility for what deliberate effort might look like, but nonetheless, I think we can't deliberate for too long on the question. I don't think.
Well, so if we consider candidates rather than say that we shall appoint, it would give us wiggle room.
Right. Marcia, anything else before I take a motion, unless you might have one?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see the public help us, because Michael Costa's point is well taken. This is a difficult time, but it's got to happen. So I think if we can get people interested in, people talk. So that would be the best way to do it, I think. But I would like to go, knowing now from Cheryl that there's precedent, I think it would be smart to follow precedent, but that's my opinion.
I don't think there's consensus for it, but really? Thank you, Marcia.
Sure.
All right, Stuart, I'll take your public comment, and then I'm gonna ask for a motion.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Cheryl, I think, makes a very good point, and I think that it should be acknowledged, and I would like to see it followed, actually, because it would provide somebody who has not only expressed interest, but who has been very aware and very knowledgeable of what is going on in town. And I really like, as far as Pam Smith, I really like the fact that she is been very knowledgeable about town finances and has offered a number of ways to save the town money and to be very, very frugal. So thanks for acknowledging my comment.
Thanks, Stuart. Go ahead, Demo. I see you snuck a hand in, which is totally fine, but thanks. Go ahead.
I'm glad it is. I too, like Cheryl, have been around for a while and have seen many situations like this happen in the past due to death and also other, vacancies. And I also agree that Pam Smith, in a way, has paid her dues. She's run a few times. She's had quite a few voters vote for her, whether she got elected or not. In this case here, she would be, in my opinion, the most likely person that you would go to, especially with the dire consequences that we're facing right now. We don't have, again, the luxury to sit on this for a while. And, she would have the opportunity to serve, show us what she can do for the town, and I'm sure she can help an awful lot with the valuable knowledge that she's had. And then in March, take it to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Demon. All right, can I get a motion, please? So we discussed advertising for the vacancy for appointment at the July 27th meeting, just to sum it up.
And also the email, the inquiries would be sent to you at your email address.
I will receive applications, yeah.
Okay. I move that we advertise for candidates to fulfill the interim select board vacancy. Candidates to apply by to have submitted applications in time for the July 27th meeting. Would that be the Wednesday before?
It's the Thursday before. Thank you, Mary. I believe it's the 21st by 3 p.m.
Applications by July 21st.
At 3 p.m.
All inquiries to be sent to Roger Arnold at gmail.com.
Roger Arnold BT at gmail.com. But we will.
All right, to Roger Arnold's
BT. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Is there a second for that motion? Thank you, Mary.
Sorry, so ratty.
It's okay.
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
Friendly amendment to advertise a vacancy post for a select board position to be filled until the next regular available election in March 2023.
I would accept that.
That's great.
Did Rod have a chance to write all that down? Because that's hard to do. I don't know if I could say it twice.
Well, I'll probably provide, I thought I was going to take minutes for this meeting. So,
well, that's impossible.
Well, I will watch it again. So we'll get it. But either way, we'll be advertising before the minutes are compiled, most likely. So yeah. Okay. So we have a motion on the table with a friendly amendment, which clarified when the election would be held. Can I call the question?
Is there a second?
Rob had previously seconded it, and I believe he accepted the friendly amendment. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm ready with Robert's rules. Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. That was great. Appreciate that. Okay, so we reordered our agenda. The next item is the contract for legal services. This is an executive session, and then we'll come back out and be in the public, and then we'll be going into an executive session for another agenda item. So you won't see much of us, I should say, to the public at 8:21, just so they can plan their evening. Can we get a motion? Oh, go ahead, Rod. Do you have a question?
Did you want to take a brief break before you?
Oh, let's do that. Let's take a 5-minute break and then come back at let's come back at 8:30, and then we'll make our motions. Thank you, Rod, for that.
You're welcome.
This is the third meeting where I've just been kicked off, which has been so stressful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Roger, I'm sorry. Let me just check. I think I can make you co-host.
Yeah. Can you make me? I think I lost it when I got kicked off. It's just, it's this work issued computer. I shouldn't have said.
Oh.
All right. All right. So here we go. So is Marcia back with us?
Not quite, I don't think. Oh, she has a different clock than we do.
Yes, I think so. Like one that's
like 1 minute or so.
1 minute. Yeah, 1 minute.
Two.
That's right.
Two.
Oh, two.
Well, there's three of us, so I'm going to resume the recording.
Recording in progress.
Okay, resuming the select board meeting at 8:31, Wednesday, July 13th. Okay, so the next, there we go. Here's Marcia. Our next item on the agenda is an executive session. It's two-part. Can we begin?
Yep, I move to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage in contract negotiations for labor law legal services. For exam revealing the relative merits of proposals, including cost, receive frank assessment of qualifications and background, and details of existing attorney-client relations.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Rod, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, actually, it's not in the language of the motion, but you may want to ask about, given that I've got the information to make a choice, you might want to invite me to be present as well. I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Can we add that, please?
And to include the town manager.
Do you have a second for that, Rob?
Second.
Okay. Yes, and this is for our labor agreement. Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. I'm going to call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. Second part.
I move to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1A for the purposes of considering contract terms for labor law legal services.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I'm going to put folks into the waiting room so we can have and pause the recording so we can have our executive session. Linda, go ahead. Do you have a clarification question as I put people into the waiting? Yes. Is there a motion to enter public session?
What was that noise?
There's one person who's still joining and who isn't inevitable. Yes. Is there a motion to enter public session?
So moved. That noise?
Okay, is there a second? There's one person who's still joining and who isn't made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Is there a motion to enter public session?
So moved. That noise?
Public session. Okay. We're here at 9:05 in the public. Okay. Is there a public action that we would wish to take? Go ahead, Mary.
I move to authorize the town manager to negotiate and sign a contract with the law firm of Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher for labor law services.
Is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. Next is another executive session. Is there a motion to do that work?
I move to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage in the negotiation of labor relations or agreements with employees. For example, revealing bargaining strategy and the town's disposition with regard to current economic conditions. And to invite the town manager?
Yes.
And the finance director, please.
And the finance director.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. Is there a second part?
Yes. I move to enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA, section 313A1B, for the purposes of considering the impact of inflation on personnel, retention, and recruitment.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any further, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I'll move folks into the waiting room.
This meeting is being recorded.
It is being recorded. Okay, is there a motion to enter public session?
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. We're in public session at 10:11. All right, after some discussion, I believe we have a public action to take. Is that right? Marcia, would you like to make it?
Sure. I move to approve a one-time cost of living allowance bonus of 5% for all employees currently employed by the town of Norwich and hired by September 1, 2022, to be paid in 4 equal installments beginning immediately and ending June 30, 2023.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, made by Marcia, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll just say quickly that this is hopefully one part of several discussions that we're discussed. The board will take up. The board will take up future discussion and other things we would like to do to retain and attract our employees. And this was, just one step that we are taking tonight. So with that motion on the table, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Our next item on the agenda is future agenda settings, but I don't know if we have the fortitude to do it.
Only to say that the future steps that you just mentioned should be part of the next meeting.
Yes, and earlier in our agenda, yeah.
And also our select board appointments.
And that should be more than enough. But we'll have other agenda.
That's a good start. Will be other things too.
Right. Okay. So after that, after a brief discussion, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
And
Made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate everyone's work. Thank you so much.
Who needs the time?
Good night.
10:13. Yes, good night.
good night.